we're going to welcome Riana Hardin, the Self-Advocacy Coordinator for the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, as well as Jaime Vargas, who works within our office at the Arc of California. They're going to be talking about Disability Vote California with us. So I am thrilled to welcome Jaime and Riana. Welcome, guys. And I'm excited to hear about Disability Vote California from you guys. Oh, and I'm sorry, there's also Gabriel Taylor, who's joining us as well. And he has been a big part of launching this also with information. And I'm going to get out of the way and hand it over then to talk about Disability Vote California.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jaime Vargas, and it's a pleasure to introduce you to Riana Hardin and Gabriel Taylor. We will be discussing how Disability Vote has improved throughout this year and the coalition we have developed. Riana?
Thank you so much, Jaime, for the introduction. And we're really excited to be here to talk about this exciting project that was started back in 2018 as a way to really galvanize and engage people with disabilities in the voting process in California. We started out with a series of webinars and doing some trainings to present information to community members, and so that they could go out and train in their communities and engage with people with disabilities in the voting process, and kind of like a train the trainer model. However, with the pandemic, obviously, we had to kind of change up the way we were doing things. So we're really excited to be here today to talk with you about kind of what the project is and what we've been able to accomplish so far. So with that in mind, Jaime, do you want to talk a little bit about why voting is important and kind of how the concept of this project kind of started?
Certainly, it would be my pleasure. Voting is important because it gives each individual their own voice, and it allows them to give their own opinion and input on how they feel their future should be determined. It not only allows an individual to be able to make their own decisions and choose how they feel the government should be best supporting them, but it also allows each and every individual to have an input on how services, financial decisions, and future outcomes of laws and decisions that may impact them are implemented. This entire process came about because we have noticed that many people in this community have had not the opportunity to express themselves before, and we wanted to improve this process. And this is the model we chose to implement.
Thank you so much, Jaime. Yeah, I remember back when we first started, going back and forth, drawing a lot from the Rev Up campaign, but also wanting to, since California is such a large state and we have so many different disability specifically advocacy organizations in California, and different types of, we have the independent living centers, as well as the regional centers and the State Council on Developmental Disabilities field offices, we really kind of wanted to create a model that was unique to meet the needs of California. With that, I'll turn it over to Gabriel Taylor. Will go over some of the kind of the basics of voting rights and why kind of like the legal background of voting rights in California for people with disabilities.
Right. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Riana and Jaime, for the introduction. And it's great to be here with you all to share some really important information on the options for voters with disabilities and also some of the work that Disability Rights California has done to raise awareness about some of the changes that have been taking place over the last several years. So my name is Gabe Taylor. I work for an organization called Disability Rights California. So we are the statewide protection and advocacy organization for people with disabilities. And we provide advocacy services and support in a lot of different areas. My primary focus is on voting rights. So we do a lot of work statewide with all 58 counties to ensure that counties are doing everything that they can to provide accessible voting process and voting services to people with disabilities. So we work with them to figure out ways that they can improve those services and ensure access to the vote for people with disabilities. So next slide. So these are just some of the landmark decisions that have been primarily working towards increasing voting access for people with disabilities. So the Help America Vote Act, or HAVA, came about as a result of all of the problems that took place during the 2000 election, the presidential election. So this was passed as a way to improve not only voting practices, but also to ensure increased accessibility of those practices. So the goal was to ensure that voting systems allowed people with disabilities a private and independent voting experience. So next slide. So just a little bit of background on the requirements for being eligible to vote. So first, you must be 18 years of age or older. You have to be a US citizen. You cannot be in prison or on parole for a felony. And you cannot be under a conservatorship where your right to vote has been taken away from you. Disability Rights California works with individuals who are under a conservatorship who may have had their right to vote taken away, because there is a process to get that right to vote reevaluated and looked at again, and possibly reinstated at some point down the road. So next slide. So some places, there are a lot of different places to access voter registration cards or to be able to register to vote online. So Disability Rights California, we provide voter registration cards as a service for all of our clients. We oftentimes, when I'm doing outreach events or presentations, I will bring a stack of voter registration cards, as will a lot of my coworkers, to ensure that people who are interested in voting may have that opportunity. You can also go to your local post office. It's a little tricky because some of these locations that you can access the voter registration cards are not available to the public right now because of the COVID restrictions. But there oftentimes you can find links on their website to get more information about voter registration opportunities. And then you can go to your local DMV office. They have voter registration available too. And then you can go to your county elections office, and oftentimes there's a link either on the county elections website, but they will also have hard copies of voter registration cards available. And then if you are a regional center client or a independent living consumer, you can go to, they have voter registration opportunities there as well. Next slide. So the ADA and Section 504, the Americans with Disabilities Act, requires that all polling places or vote centers be accessible. And so that ensures that people who have disabilities are able to access the same voting experience as anybody else would who comes in to vote in person. So, next slide. So a lot of people ask which is the better option, using the accessible voting system or voting by mail. And I oftentimes go back and forth. I personally enjoy going in person to my local vote center. I just enjoy being a part of the process, and also being a person with a disability myself, making sure that people see members of the disability community participating in the elections process is important to me. So being able to have that opportunity to go and vote in person, if I'm able to, is really a rewarding experience for me, and it is for a lot of other people. But again, it is a personal choice, and in California, the great part of voting is that you do have the option to vote by mail. And if any of you voted in the 2020 election, especially in November, you should have received a vote by mail ballot automatically in your mailbox if you were a registered voter. So it made the process very convenient and easy if you were interested in voting but may not have been able to leave your home. So next slide. So accessible voting systems, they offer voters the option to be able to complete a ballot by offering different accessibility features. So depending on your disability, they offer features that accommodate voters who may have vision or mobility disabilities, learning or intellectual or developmental disabilities, manual dexterity or other disabilities as well. So these voting systems provide or offer a touchscreen technology that makes the navigating through the ballot a good deal easier. So, and it also allows for a private and independent voting experience. Next slide. So for voters who have sight or mobility or dexterity disabilities, many times the polling places or vote centers are the only place that you are able to cast a private and independent ballot. So we've worked very closely with the county election staff in many, many counties throughout the state to ensure that they're putting everything in place to make this possible. So there are still steps in the process that require some assistance, but we are very, very close to achieving this idea of private and independent voting for people with disabilities. And again, our work is the overall goal is to ensure that people with disabilities are full participants in the democratic process as anyone else should be and is their right. So, next slide. So a lot of people have the question of who can I get help from on election day or to fill out my ballot at home. And so if you go to vote in person, you can get assistance from a family member, a friend, a poll worker, or a vote center worker. The only two exceptions to this rule are you can't, if you have somebody from your work, if you're your employer or an agent of your employer, they are not able to help you, or if you are a member of a union, a fellow union member cannot help you. But anybody else is totally fine. And I always, recommend by several of my coworkers have funny stories about getting family members to come help them, assist them to fill out their ballot. And they tell a story of getting into an argument at the polling place because their family member didn't agree with the choices that they wanted to make. So I always suggest people choose somebody that will honor their choices, just to make sure that there aren't any problems. But again, this right of being able to get assistance to complete your ballot is to ensure that people are able to have this sacred voting experience. And so if you are getting assistance from a poll worker or a vote center worker, they are required to keep your choices confidential. So they can't be sharing information as to who you voted for or what propositions you voted for, because all of that should remain confidential. So next slide. So vote by mail, it was at one time, it was oftentimes referred to as absentee voting. It's now called vote by mail. It was primarily provided as an accommodation for people with disabilities. But now, due to the how convenient it is and how easy it is to be able to access it, a lot of voters, even without disabilities, use it just because of its convenience. But it is oftentimes the preferred method of voting for people with disabilities, just because it ensures that you have the privacy to be able to do it from your home. And also it doesn't require you to go out to a polling location or a vote center location, which may be a little bit more problematic for you. Next slide. So in 2018, there was a law established called the Voters' Choice Act. And the VCA changed the way that people vote. And it was established as a way to increase voting options for all people, but specifically people with disabilities. It provided a lot of increased ways to vote and to vote accessibly. So as part of the VCA, one method of voting called Remote Accessible Vote by Mail, or RAVBM, was offered and established as a way to allow a voter to vote from home using their assistive technology through their home computers. So next slide.
Sorry, Gabe. I just wanted, in the interest of time, we do have a couple of interesting questions in the chat, and I wanted to be sure that we're able to address those concerns and questions before the presentation is over, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, if that is totally fine. Let's see.
So the first question comes from Yasmin. Where can I find training materials to teach about voting and accessing policies and platforms, teaching about democracy, what it means, and how to assert rights?
So there are a lot of different helpful resources available through Disability Rights California, our website. We have an entire section of our website dedicated to voting accessibility and different voting issues. We have a section that has publications that focus on different subjects. We have one on, for example, we have one on voting while under conservatorship, or if people are needing some information, if they have a family member or a friend or a son or daughter who may be in some type of facility. We have information on your voting rights if you are in a facility. So there are a lot of different ways, and I can, what I'll do is I will put the link to the publications in the chat so people can have that if they're interested. But yeah, so, and then in terms of other options, there are a number. So CFILC has some information on the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers, has some information on voting rights as well. And then you can always check into if you are a consumer at any of the independent living centers. Oftentimes they will have information dedicated to voting issues or voting accessibility as well.
I'd also like to add that the State Council on Developmental Disabilities regional office staff also do a bunch of outreach and trainings related to voting rights, as I'm sure too the ARC of California is a wealth of information and resources. I know that we're running short on time, and we also have a question in the chat about conservatorship. Maybe Nadine, can you reach out to Gabriel or Gabe Taylor directly to
yes,
have your questions answered?
Rihanna, I will put my contact information in the chat so people can contact me directly with any additional questions.
Sounds good. And then we did have another question. In light of the issues with 2020 voting, do you think that vote by mail will still be allowed for those who truly need it?
Yes. So that is one requirement of the Voters' Choice Act that many of the counties are moving towards. They're well over, I think we're now up to 18 counties that have it, that have established it. And they provide, one of the requirements is that they send every registered voter in the entire county, they automatically send them a vote by mail ballot ahead of any major election. So that is something that is required by the Voters' Choice Act. And so it was provided for health and safety concerns in November of 2020 as part of an executive order that was written by the governor. So that was to ensure the health and safety of all voters. But these counties that are moving towards the Voters' Choice Act, they are required to automatically send every registered voter a vote by mail ballot.
Well, I just want to take a moment to thank you guys so much. Gabe and Riana and Jaime, your time and commitment in launching Disability Vote California was amazing and getting off the ground. And there's a number of organizations now that are a part of it. And really appreciate you guys taking the time to provide not only the background on Disability Vote California, but also, of course, a lot of the details, Gabe, you just provided on voting rights and voting laws.
Yeah, and I know that I sort of threw a lot of information at everybody very quickly. So I'm always available by email or by phone call if folks have questions or they were wanted just some more information about some of the things that I mentioned during the discussion.
Thank you. And Gabe put his contact info in the chat for everybody if you do have questions specifically about voting. Jaime, Riana, Gabe, thank you so much for joining us today about Disability Vote California.